Hey guys, this is Sam. Before we jump into this week's episode, some exciting news. Saxon and I, both of us, are going to be at Water and Music's Wavelengths Summit in beautiful, scenic Bushwick, New York on May 6th. So yeah, we're excited about it. We're excited we love meeting folks live. We have in a move of increasing podcast legitimacy, we have a discount code that you can use that gives you 30% off speaker price of the ticket price. It is WM-speaker disc. That's WM-speaker disc for a discounted ticket to the Water and Music Summit. Hope to see you all there. Okay, let's do this episode, Saxon.
Welcome to another episode of Money for Nothing, the podcast about music and capitalism. Saxon Baird with Sam Backer as always. And today we are going to be talking a little history, but a more recent history. We're talking blurred lines and all of its bad juju. Copyright has definitely been a hot topic this past week. With supposedly AI generated Drake songs racking up millions of streams on TikTok and elsewhere. The song in question recently got pulled from streaming services today. And now like hella folks are talking about copyright and AI created music, which is here to stay, will continue to be a story. But we're talking not so much AI created music and copyright, but a fundamental lawsuit that sort of changed the game, I guess, in regards to copyrighted music. And that's the Blurred Lines case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Saxon, we've been wanting to do an episode about this legal kerfluffle for a while. And I mean, I think that framing of kind of humming in the background, the sense that there's about to be a whole new set of copyright legislation, maybe, but certainly copyright like lawsuits, the way things actually are legislated in this country, lawsuits, that are really seems like they might really kind of shape the landscape for these new musical technologies. And given all of that, we thought it was a really nice time to kind of, like you said, like take a step back and look at both this lawsuit itself and what it kind of tells us about copyright and how copyright works and how IP works in music. And then also kind of suss out a little bit maybe how it's shaped the last half decade. It was 5 years ago, which is crazy to think about. This lawsuit went down, how it shaped the last half decade of music, and like how that might change in the future, I guess.
So maybe let's like start with discount Justin Timberlake, Robin Thicke himself, and who is kind of an unlikely star, and it was really started maybe with like Lil Wayne remaking a Robin Thicke song on the Carter 2, which you apparently you don't realize.
No, bring the research.
Yeah. And that's actually what kind of really started to propel his career a bit, because he started getting sought out by hip hop stars a bit, and which led to Pharrell signing him on Star Trek, and that led to a number of albums. His first album went platinum, and
which is actually the worst cover among the worst covers I've ever seen. It's like he's like in kind of like whatever the position that you are when you're like lying seductively on top of a piano, like whatever you call that position, and then he's like getting up, like it's one of those like Descent of Man things where it's like you go from a frog to like a full walking person, and it's just terrible. In the end, he's like wearing a suit and he's like, she's absolutely among the worst album covers of all time.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to look it up. I actually haven't. I don't know if I've seen it. Okay.
It's bad. It's really bad.
Okay. Let's look this up.
Do it right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Do it right now.
The evolution of Robin Thicke.
And your Google searches are trash now forever.
Oh God, this is really bad. What on God's earth? Man,
I told you,
2013
dude.
is
What's
a
one of
bummer
those,
of a time.
dude, right? Literally, and I'm like, not. I speak in a lot of hyperbole. That's one of the worst album covers I've ever
I
seen.
mean, yeah, that's really, really bad. All right. I will not link to it in the show notes, but you should go Google that and feel terrible. Uh,
I mean, it is a funny moment though. Like actually, you called him like a budget
JT.
a budget Justin Timberlake, and like it is this funny moment where you do realize like how far various musical conversations have moved in the past, I guess, decade now since the song was released, right? Like, this is that post Amy Winehouse moment where like British soul singers are blowing up, like white British soul singers are blowing up.
I mean, they're not just British. I mean, like Detroit or Michigan's very own Mayor Hawthorne. I remember that. That was like a moment too. Signed to Stone's Throw has a song featuring Kendrick Lamar. Excuse me.
But yeah, it's this funny like R&B is on top of the charts. This like Obama. It's a weird moment.
Wait, is
in
Mayor
music.
Hawthorne the budget Robin Thicke?
I
Sorry,
have
okay.
no idea who Mayor Hawthorne is. I don't want to know. I don't need to know. I don't want to know.
Sorry, continue on. It is a weird moment.
This is also the moment when the kind of like post hip hop producers are ruling, like specifically the Pharrell on one side and Timbaland on the other are just running the pop charts. I forget what year it was. I think it was 2007 or 2008 where Timbaland had 11 out of the top 100 songs on the American charts that year. Just insane, where they're doing, they kind of all the tools that they developed making avant pop masterpieces in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they're just using them for evil, basically. Or at least like for bags. They're just taking their artistic credibility and turning out Promiscuous Girl, which is actually a good song. I like Promiscuous Girl.
Man, what a weird time. Okay, yeah, so
that's the moment. Anyway, that's the moment we're talking about.
Yeah, we're talking about, right. And like, so like Blurred Lines 2013 drops and it's a hit. It's written about at the time quite glowingly.
I mean, it's a hit.
Controversy hits.
I mean, it's a hit because also there's like a notorious video.
Yeah, well, so I was about to say, like, the controversy begins, and there is endless controversy about this song that just has like, it's just born under a bad sign. They purposely get their video banned from YouTube by uploading a version with topless models in the original shoot of the video, which immediately, of course, violates terms on YouTube. But that's, all news is good news. So the song, because of the controversy, rose up the chart. It goes number 1. And people kind of start to be like, this song's on this video, it's kind of misogynistic bullshit. But regardless, the song is number 1 for 12 weeks. And that's a long fucking time.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's this funny thing where, like, even in 2013, like, we were like,
even in 2013,
this is kind of rough.
Yeah, but not like immediately, but like people, like I'd say like in the beginning, like people, you're kind of like an outlier for calling it out, but people like are calling it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of that like, again, it's funny, like the extent to which this really was a moment in time. To me, it's this kind of very Vicey, like Vice magazine-y moment where it's like before internet trolls became Nazis, right? Like when it was still like people were like, oh, we're being like winkingly
critical theory light.
We're being winkingly misogynistic, not like we support the trad wife movement.
Oh, I see that. Okay,
you know what I mean? Like this, it's to me, this all part of the same. It's like,
wait, what's wrong with the trad life movement? Just kidding.
No. It's like I feel like they're being like, it's this funny thing where they're being winkingly misogynistic, but they're not like we support the men's rights movement.
Yeah, no, that hasn't happened yet.
That hasn't happened yet.
Nor do Robin Thicke and Pharrell probably don't support that. To be
clear.
No.
But it's this funny moment where like they're like, oh, we can like play with misogyny as like a fun, sexy thing, and people at the time were like, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, there was a few people who called it out. I believe there was a Vice writer who called it misogynistic bullshit, as I said earlier. The Daily Beast, which think what you will about them, called the song kind of rapey. And then it was
that was the height of the Daily Beast era too.
Yeah, that was, yeah. And then also Robin Thicke didn't help his case by making some like dumb comments when asked about the misogyny in the song by saying something to the effect of like, "Oh, I love degrading women. Like, I'm so happy I never get to do that." Which apparently he was joking. It was like he was taken out of context. And he claims that the writer didn't hear the sarcasm, which I think I will give that to him. I don't think he was saying that. There was probably some sarcasm there, but nonetheless, a stupid thing to say and misinterpreted when in print.
As we will discuss later, it turns out that by Robin Thicke's own admission, he was high on Vicodin and vodka for every single interview he did regarding Blurred Lines.
Oh, so I thought it was like also high on Vicodin and vodka for the recording of the song.
I think he was high on Vicodin. Is the point? So like,
low on Vicodin? Who knows? Okay.
Robin Thicke was loose, baby.
Yeah, he was loose for sure. So
do you really quickly? I do want to do you remember when you first heard the song?
Absolutely not. I don't even know if I've ever heard the song. Just kidding. I mean, I've been to a wedding, so that's what you're asking.
I mean, I don't. Yeah.
Okay,
it's one of those songs...
Actually, I'm gonna pause your pause and say that actually, having worked probably over 100 weddings as like a catering bartender, that song got played at almost every single wedding. So just find that fascinating, considering the like misogynistic controversy around it.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's funny. It's one of those songs where it's like, it's like upper echelon car commercial vibes. You know what I mean?
Facts.
But like, it's kind of good. Like, it's really annoying and gets stuck in your head forever. And like, it's very, very like if you wanted, and I'm sure that there are deep cut productions that I'm missing in this. So like listeners, please do add us with brilliant late period Pharrell productions. But to me, it's like such a clear on the slope that goes from the pure brilliance that is drop it like it's hot to the like bottomless pit that is happy. Blurred Lines to me is like where Pharrell starts taking those brilliant sonic moves and taking his ability to make like quantitized drum machines incredibly funky, but like starts just like pouring on the syrup and like more and more high fructose corn syrup till you get to happy.
Oh yeah, happy. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting take and super fascinating. And I mean, yeah, there was something to the track. I mean, it was number one for 12 weeks. People liked it, despite the ensuing controversy. And the controversy continued because after a few voices, journalists calling it out, and Thicke making some dumb comments, there is the infamous VMA controversy with Miley Cyrus, which
I was
John
there.
Harmonica. You were there.
I was there. I was 4 rows back. I was on the floor for that.
Okay. Just learning this.
It was wild. It was a wild time.
And when you were there watching it, did you find it, as John Carmonica later called it, a banner year for clumsy white appropriation of black culture?
Yeah.
Big time. So this really, and I mean,
I
maybe
think
you were
in
there,
fairness,
so you can give details.
In fairness, I think that Robin, from the floor, Robin Thicke was an add-on to the insanity that was Miley Cyrus, and not even
right.
Not
so
to,
so to be clear, like Miley Cyrus comes out and performs, and she has nothing but like black dancers behind her, and they're like gyrating, like doing some like fake cunnilingus on stage, and then like she's performing whatever her hit was at the time, and then Robin Thicke comes out after that song, and then Miley and Robin do Blurred Lines, and it results in, at some point, like Miley Cyrus has like a foam hand finger that he's like gyrating on or something, and it was just it caused a lot of controversy, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean it's like Miley doing that we can't stop and we won't stop. Produced by Mike Will made it. So another brilliant black producer. So no, yeah, like From the Floor, what was weird about that was that it was definitely deeply uncomfortable and appropriative. For whatever reason, in one of the few times that this has ever happened, I felt like usually there's a weird controversy and the guy skates off free and the female performer, like, his career catches fire and burns. Check out, like, Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake at the Super Bowl. In this one, like, from where I was literally sitting, like, Robin Thicke was a weird little addendum to what was clearly Miley Cyrus's show, which was incredibly uncomfortable. But look, from the perspective of, like, being pretty drunk on the floor, like, it was deeply uncomfortable. The level of energy she put out on that stage was impressive. Like, it was like, I think it was like always problematic, but just like as a show in and of itself went over better live than on camera. Because I watched the videos later, I'm like, oh, that's way worse than I remember it being.
Also, like, you probably didn't have like a clear view or whatever.
I had really good seats.
Okay.
It was a weird moment in my life.
Right. Yeah,
no, we can cut all this, but like, it's true.
No. But I mean, the point being is that it caused a lot of controversy, and afterwards, like, the sort of isolated complaints and criticisms of the song now, like, were contextualized within, like, this also being paired with this Miley Cyrus performance.
Yeah.
And basically, like, there was radio bans, there was protests from sexual abuse survivors, and then it all accumulated to a backstage photo being released of Robin Thicke basically at an after party with his hand on the ass of, like, a young blonde woman. And Robin Thicke had been, like, married for a long time, and actually
he was like a wife guy.
Yeah, he was a wife guy, and actually, like, in a lot of the initial sort of controversies around the song being misogynistic, one of the things that he said was like, oh no, it's about my wife. Like, of course she wants to. We've been married for like 20 years. Like, that was like actually one of the excuses that he gave. And so, like, not long after that photo emerged, his wife divorces him, and this is not relevant for our story, but it's just so cringeworthy that I have to mention it. In preceding concerts, apparently Robin Thicke would project a photo of her on, like, the screen behind the stage and tell the entire audience, yeah, I'm gonna get my lady back, I'm gonna get her back, which is just really, really cringe and awkward. So the reason why we're bringing up all this sort of, like, backstory is because, you know, there is a chance that maybe the song is a hit, it's on the charts for 12 weeks, and it goes the fuck away. But the song had legs in the fact that it was constantly getting press with all this negative press, the VMA awards. And then on top of all that's happened, it's constantly getting all this attention. In an interview, I believe in GQ, basically Thicke admits that Pharrell and him were in the studio talking about his all-time favorite song, Marvin Gaye's Got to Give It Up. And he said, damn, we should make something like that, something with that groove. And so this becomes basically the cornerstone for the copyright lawsuit filed by the Marvin Gaye estate against the song Blurred Lines.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, Saxon, in addition to all this cultural context, there was, I think, from fairly early on, like, critically writing about the song, people are like, it vibes like Got to Give It Up by Marvin Gaye, which is
that's correct.
Classic non-album, like single only. I think it's dropped as part of a greatest hits compilation. Banger. Yeah, that it sounds a lot like Got to Give It Up, this like classic 76 Marvin Gaye song. And I think it's in the critical discourse that, like, this is right, but this is also this moment of, like, it's post Amy Winehouse. It's retro soul vibes are back in a big way. And I think it's kind of looked at as like something it really, the musical similarities are real, but it's not until all this other stuff is kind of floating around and the song has continued to be this major center of attention and money, right? Because, again, this was like, it was 12 weeks number one, but also it was just a huge song. And I also think that I think you were saying earlier that you've seen it in like dozens of weddings. It's the kind of song that gets added to like everyone's playlist and is gonna generate residuals forever, right? This is not a one-hit wonder that's going away. This is a one-hit wonder that you can play as a modern song after you play a Jackson 5 song, and like that's money. And so actually there's 2 lawsuits, really 3 lawsuits.
Yeah, I'm glad you're going to actually mention that. Yeah, because this adds like some context that I think a lot of stuff written about this lawsuit, the Blurred Lines lawsuit, they don't mention the original lawsuits, which is really interesting.
Yeah, so it's actually in amongst all this controversy, right? There are these 3 intertwined lawsuits, and they kind of, and this legal background is actually really interesting for kind of understanding the dimensions of the case. First, you have kind of I guess it's not a lawsuit. It's not kind of like a legal threat from the Gaye estate, which is Marvin Gaye's children, saying, boy, this sounds like our dad's song, doesn't it? And that's joined actually by Bridgeport Music Incorporated. And Bridgeport Music is a Detroit-based publisher that controls the copyrights for Parliament and Funkadelic, George Clinton's bands, and has been, but is not affiliated particularly closely with George Clinton himself. This is George Clinton not having his own control of the publishing of his music. And Bridgeport Music is notorious for suing people when they sample P-Funk songs without permission. And given the fact that everyone samples P-Funk songs constantly because they're, along with James Brown, like the cornerstone of disco and rap, they're like a very litigious bunch that George Clinton himself has a lot of beef and has been feuding, it seems like, for like decades with. So there's an initial kind of legal statement by Bridgeport and by the Gaye estate saying this sounds a lot like the songs Got to Give It Up and a Funkadelic song called Sexy Ways. In response to this, as the controversy is building, George Clinton comes out on Twitter and says, there are no samples of my material in this song. And it seems like there may have been a kind of off-road backroom agreement where unclear, and we can talk about this a little bit more, because actually, if there is copyright infringement in this song, it is probably from Sexy Ways and not from Got to Give It Up. The initial verse melody of Sexy Ways and the initial verse melody of Blurred Lines are pretty much identical, where there's maybe a case there. Like, maybe I'm not saying that.
But what you're suggesting is the possibility of George Clinton and Pharrell and company kind of being like, like, I don't want you to have that lawsuit. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. We're like supporting each other here. Like, I'm gonna come out public and say that like this isn't there's no copyright.
Which in the kind of, again, and we'll talk about this a lot over the course of this episode, in this funny, like, in between, like, the court of public opinion and the actual courts, like, George Clinton coming out and saying there's no copyright infringement here publicly does make it harder to convince a court that there's copyright infringement.
Yeah. And,
even if the publisher, who is not George Clinton, thinks there
right.
is.
And, that actually goes both ways because, like, as I said earlier, the cornerstone of this lawsuit that the Marvin Gaye estate eventually brings against Pharrell and Robin Thicke is based on this quote that Thicke gave or said in a GQ interview about how, like, they really were trying to actually make something like the groove of Marvin Gaye's Got to Give It Up.
Yeah. So
public statements go a long way, apparently.
Yeah. For sure. And we'll kind of dive into that as you get into the lawsuit itself. So what happens then is that Pharrell and Thicke, and note, it's important here, Pharrell has like 70% or like 60% of the songwriting of the track. It is a mostly Pharrell-owned publishing with like something like 60% Pharrell, something like 30% Robin Thicke, and something like 13% T.I. T.I. who manages to like gracefully extricate himself from all of this. Like,
Was T.I. in jail at that
has
time?
his own.
Wasn't he?
T.I. has his own set of legal
Right.
complexities in this moment that we are not going to comment on. And T.I. is like, nope, no time for this. Yeah. So, in response to this like initial move from the Gaye estate, Williams and Thicke sue the Gaye estate, basically saying that like, you are threatening our business and you've done damage to us, and kind of preemptively sued them, basically attempting to intimidate the Gaye estate into backing down.
Has the opposite effect.
It has the opposite effect, yeah. It not only does it not make the Gaye estate back down and make them go ahead with this and make it definitely a lawsuit, and the Gaye estate then sues Pharrell and Thicke and T.I., but T.I. gets out of it shortly thereafter. But also it seems that like the Pharrell's lawsuit is thrown out because of the very specific. This is where we're going to get into different kinds of legal proof about how songs sound similar and what counts as similarity. But for this initial lawsuit, my understanding is that Pharrell's basically like, these songs are definitely not similar. And the judge is like, well, like these songs are so obviously not similar that you were doing damage to me by claiming that you might sue me for saying that they're similar. You might sue me because they're too similar. And the judge is like, these songs are kind of similar. Get out of my court. So then Williams's lawsuit's thrown out, and the Gaye estate's lawsuit, or they're combined in some complicated legal way, but basically like the Gaye estate's lawsuit for damages, for copyright infringement of Blurred Lines, copyright infringement of Got to Give It Up, goes forward and goes to court.
And in court, Williams and his lawyers still like are pretty sure they're going to win, and they go through a kind of like very detailed demonstration in court about how like while the two songs do share common elements, like a groove on the electric piano and the bass and accents on the cowbell, that actually the notes and the rhythms themselves are different, and the two compositions are not even in the same key.
So yeah, let's get into this, because this is basically this is where it gets really fascinating, because what you have here is the kind of ripple effects of the previous several decades of pop musical practice and black musical practice and their interactions with the legal systems, right? If Pharrell was working in the late 80s, early 90s, he would have sampled Got to Give It Up, right? The same way that De La Soul or the Beastie Boys or any number, or like Tribe Called Quest, were sampling songs from their inspirations. But in the wake of kind of hip hop's explosion, in the wake of a kind of a series of lawsuits by the holders of recording copyrights against samples, the ability of people to use samples in music without it getting cleared by the original rights holders, without it being cleared by the person who made the original recording, gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, right? And it's not just one court case, it's a whole bunch of them, where basically originally there's this idea that maybe there's like a minimum amount where if you sample less than a certain amount of the song, you're in the clear, and that gets demolished by the courts by the mid-90s. Then there's a whole discussion that's still ongoing of fair use, and like, if you're transforming the music enough, does that mean that you, like within kind of parody law, basically, like is there a way that you can have fair use of a sample such that it's not taking the other person's idea, but you're actually using as raw material to transform it into something new? And that's something that's still litigated today. But all of which is to say, if you're a canny hitmaker by 2013, when this song was being released, if you're a canny hitmaker, you're not, and you want to take home all the money, you're not going to sample stuff usually. you're going to try to write around it. And that's because there's a very different set of laws, like we've discussed a bunch of time on the show, right? There's a very different set of laws between recordings, which can be sampled, and compositions, which can have their IP infringed on. Basically, we've said before, this composition, this is music publishing, right? Like the melody and lyrics and sometimes chords, but not usually. It's mostly melody and lyrics that's understood as containing the essential intellectual property of a piece of music. And those are that the legal infrastructure that defines this is created in the early 20th century around sheet music and a piano-based system before recordings really exist, or at the very beginnings of recordings in some ways, and are basically not done with any imagination of what recording studios are going to be able to do, right? With the wide range of tonal possibilities that a recording studio can allow, and zero interest in any form, basically, of Afro-diasporic music culture, which means that rhythms are much harder to copyright, and rhythmic parts are not particularly easy to capture in sheet music form. Like, unless it's a drum solo, like trying to notate like a famous Motown drummer like Bernard Pretty Purdy's like 6/8 swing, like Western musical notation is just absolutely terrible at that. Like, that's not what it's for. It can't do it. It would be like a nightmare to even try to use sheet music to capture like the feel of a drum. But a good producer like Pharrell, and certainly like pop producers by 2013, like they know, like Pharrell's amazing at making drums feel a certain way. Pharrell's made millions of dollars making drums feel a certain way. But all of that is not able to be captured really in the sheet music. And more specifically and more pertinently, in this case, it wasn't just like an abstract question is like, could Motown have had the drum part groove of Got to Give It Up in sheet music form and deposit it in the Copyright Office, which is like, maybe, but the point is they didn't. They just didn't. And so as the Gaye estate is trying to sue Thicke and Pharrell, they run into this very kind of this very big issue for them, right? Which is that the songs sound really, really similar, but basically none of the musical elements that are in the official composition of the song share musical elements that are in the official composition of Blurred Lines. Even like big pieces of the song, like the keyboard comping, like I don't even think that's notated. It's like which means that it isn't there. And so that's where it's this kind of fascinating case. Like that's where probably, like, if this case had gone the way everyone thought that this case was going to go, that's where it would have ended, right? Because basically, in these copyright infringement cases, sorry to get too deep in the legal weeds here, but there we go. There's 3 elements that you have to prove. Number 1, you have to prove that they had heard the song.
Which was proven in the GQ. Obviously they've heard it, but it was actually literally proven in the GQ interview.
It's also, and this is fascinating because in terms of, one of the things we're going to talk about a lot today is the ways in which the legal infrastructure for copyright starts to buckle under the strains of early 21st century musical life, right? And in ways that are all kind of interesting and fascinating and indicative ways. And one of the ways is that this idea of like that whether you had heard the piece of music is an important part of it is something that makes a lot more sense in the 40s than it does when like everything's on Spotify.
Yeah. Right.
Did you have access to the recording? It's like, yes, also, I have a Spotify subscription. I have access to every recording.
Right.
And so like, this legal, like, again, they like the GQ really did help them here, but it's like that part is kind of collapsed as like a reasonable defense. That's one. Then there's something called an like extrinsic test. And that's basically a expert musicological analysis of the compositions in question. And again, this is to emphasize that given our Baroque legal system, there's the composition, which is the music and lyrics. Like if you got to give it up in sheet music so that like your chorus teacher could play it in school. And then there's the recordings. And the recordings are an entirely different ballgame. And we know that there was no sampling. So those are just out, right? There's no piece of music in the recording that is the same piece of music that's in the recording of Blurred Lines. So you have supposedly these two pieces of music. And from the pieces of music, clearly the court cases he said, she said. Clearly the court cases he said, she said, but musicological like analysis around it is like these are not the same songs. They've got a different melody, they've got a different key, they've got different lyrics. Like they're both verse chorus, but like so is everything else. Like if these two songs, and that's really key, I think, if these two songs could be found to be musically similar enough that Blurred Lines infringes on Got to Give It Up, almost any two pieces of music could be found similar enough that the later one would infringe on the former.
Williams and Thicke ended up having to pay something like a little over like $5 million in damages because of this, because they lost this lawsuit. And, because of that, I think, and the very reason that you just said, like there was like an amicus brief that was like signed by like Rivers Cuomo and Hans Zimmer and all these different,
like hundreds of performers.
Basically like this is going to be like an issue like for us. I think it actually it said by eliminating any meaningful standard for drawing the line between permissible inspiration and unlawful copying, the judgment is certain to stifle creativity and impede the creative process.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right, right? Like there's this worry that all of a sudden, like what's supposed to be the clear line between that would stop this like a non-serious, like non-real lawsuit from happening is obliterated. And I actually think that it's obliterated. And so there's a lot of question about like, why did the judge behave in this way, right? Because the judge this is like, there's a two-step process, right? There's extrinsic, where the judge has to allow it to have passed an extrinsic test in order to let it get to a jury stage, when there's a intrinsic part where the jury can just sort of decide. And actually, it's not supposed to be musicological analysis. It's supposed to be like your average Joe listener. So it's like this two, like A, can the average Joe listener tell? And B, can like experts tell? And I think my sense is that there's a lot of question of why the judge like allowed, basically in making an argument to the jury, allowed the musical experts to break all kinds of rules about basically like what the jury's actually supposed to be deciding on. That they played recordings of the songs, which they're not supposed to do because the recordings actually don't matter from a legal standpoint here. They play like mashups of the songs that experts for the defense make, and basically like really stress, I think, people thought that this kind of intrinsic like man or person on the street perspective of like, does this pass the smell test for being similar, had like a far larger part of this decision, given like how the judge was able to like structure what evidence was admissible or not admissible, and like when it got to a jury and how it got to the jury. And so there's a lot of questions of like why the judge did all of this. This is where we really get the exact legal minutia of what the judge did. It really pushes the boundaries of my understanding, my ability to understand law review articles. So music lawyers, please explain, please do email us and say like why I've misunderstood the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic tests of copyright in regards to music publishing. However, I do think that at some level, I would argue, however, right? It seems to me that the reason the judge does this is because there's so much tension. And this is where it gets to like the kind of interesting, to me, like the heart of this case, right? That there's so much tension between what at a legal level is supposed to be happening and the clear fact that, and like no one would deny that Blurred Lines draws heavily from Got to Give It Up, right? And it's such a disjunct. Like what's able to be captured in publishing and what's able to be captured in the actual groove and feel of the song, that the judge seems unable or unwilling to like play, like be a legal hard ass basically, and allows these other considerations that are maybe not reflected in the law, but like actually fit with how everyone kind of understands music to function in the world, allows them into the case. And that's kind of the shocker, right? Because then all of a sudden, all kinds of borrowing that like toes the legal line is potentially up for questioning.
What you're saying is that it was juicy.
What do you mean?
It was like a juicy story.
Yeah. And like they're the same song. And like the thing is that our copyright system is so far removed from the way that music's actually made that to say there was no relationship between these songs once you heard them, like even a judge who probably should have like towed the line, even this judge was unable to do it. And I think that opens up a whole host of questions about like, should there be a better way to understand the relationships between these songs, given the fact that like at one level, any string of 4 notes has already been played, and at another level, that like cowbell and keyboard groove and making it sound like a 70s cowbell and keyboard groove is like a set of very intentional artistic decisions that right now we have no way of like grappling with.
So what you see is this like shift of like the kind of original reason why we even have plagiarism laws as well, you know, which was actually to like promote creativity and culture, and now it's like actually doing it could be argued that it's maybe restricting it now, or it's like creating this whole weird trend and market for like just anything that's similar can be now sued, and we're already beginning to see that with like basically Ed Sheeran being like a major target, but
constantly
also,
everyone's picking on poor Ed.
Yeah, or you know, and like maybe this isn't so much a bullshit lawsuit, but you're beginning to see more of these lawsuits. For the one I wrote about in The Guardian regarding like reggaeton and the Fish Market track, or you know, so yeah, I mean, it's like you're just seeing like a lot of more. It kind of opened up this whole floodgate of possibilities that is really more, or arguably more restricting artists, and also for this podcast, taking away money that they could possibly earn. Because also one thing that's happening, and we can get into this maybe later, but one thing that's happening is that songwriters are being retroactively added to tracks because there might be some of these similarities that you've kind of mentioned in regards to this case, which means less money for the artist. And I think one example is Olivia Rodrigo, and I think there is even, I read somewhere, I don't know where it is in my notes, but that she's lost like a lot of money, like because of that she could have potentially made off of her like massive hit of an album.
Yeah. That she wrote in Paramore and a couple other people too, I think. Yeah. So I guess in the wake of this, right? So this is a stunner of a decision that the jury finds for the Gaye estate. It's not helped by these really, like we said, the court of public opinion comes in here. These damning deposition videos where like Robin Thicke, it's just like on drugs and kind of being a jerk. Pharrell actually like is incredibly articulate, which is unsurprising given the fact that he's in many ways a musical genius. But is like clearly like an operator, right? Like Pharrell is not like the happy hat wearing man in these depositions. Like Pharrell's like a really smart, tough, canny guy that like like I could see a jury being like, I think he stole it.
Yeah, and no, and I think that, but I think this made to put a pin on that for a second. I think that is also something that just to remind ourselves is that like the complexities that go into like a musical composition that you just explained, and then pairing that with like current like plagiarism laws, and you're expecting like the average Joe to really kind of be able to like parse this all out and understand that, you know, in the form of a jury, like, you know, you're not getting musicologists, you're not getting musical experts, like, you know, on the stand for a judge or like in the jury box. And so that's when these sort of other elements come into place, like Robin Thicke being wasted or whatever, giving his deposition, like maybe Pharrell not coming off like particularly likable and maybe like a little bit like arrogant, like those things like begin to kind of play a role.
Yeah. For sure. And the sense that this is kind of out of control, I think, comes from that. Again, I would recommend anyone watching Pharrell's testimony. It's
we gotta link this shit.
I came away being like, Pharrell is, I mean, like, I knew Pharrell was really, really smart and really, really articulate, but I came away with that being like, I would not ever want to get into an argument with Pharrell. Yeah. But so in the wake of this, right, what you get is kind of the floodgates, like you're saying, open up, right? And all of a sudden, all of these lawsuits that seemed like a real stretch are all of a sudden in the realm of possibility. And all kind of major artists, some of them more deserved, some of them way less, get hit by lawsuit after lawsuit. So like a couple of things start to happen, I think, right? And it starts to shift the industry in a couple of ways. I mean, for one, artists get nervous, right? And songwriters get nervous and they start being really, really careful about what they're writing, which is a problem for all kinds of musical forms that have similarities between songs. I mean, there's like Damon Krakowski, who's a former guest on this podcast, wrote an article at the time that just said originality is a con. And he's right? Like the idea that musicians are like individual geniuses making up unique combinations of sounds that no one else ever could is like capital R romanticism bullshit. It's like music comes from communities. It's listened to in communities. It's enjoyed in communities. It's produced by communities. And copyright is a really, like we've said before, it's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. And it's really, you know, a factory for nailing Jell-O to a wall created by the major label system and created by the music industry and perfected by the major label system. And it's an awkward fit with the actualities of human creativity. And that this lawsuit and its results really only highlight that. What's funny, though, I think, is that, and there's been less written about this, but I think that it seems fair to speculate a little bit, which is that at least some of the rush into, in the wake of this lawsuit, all of a sudden, it's a lot better to settle early than it is to go to court, right? And as you say, all of a sudden, there's a lot of people who are borrowing songs that previously maybe wouldn't have gotten sued, or previously people didn't know what kind of money you could get, and now all of a sudden they're cutting folks in as songwriters proactively. And that's step one. And step two, I think that we've seen in more recent years, is all of a sudden this increases the potential value of a lot of these catalogs. In addition, there's all of this private equity money flowing into these catalogs from older songwriters. And so what you get as the kind of sense of these like behind the scenes deals where people who older songwriters get added to new songs as contributors become more and more common, all of a sudden, in some ways, like the incentive switches. So you move from like the Gaye estate, where their primary thing is like, we've got Marvin Gaye's recordings and songwriting, and like that's the legacy that we're trying to safeguard and prevent people from like borrowing or stealing, and also that's like as a business, that's how we're getting our money, to a newer version, which is like, these old recordings are one revenue stream in a streaming economy, but also the IP is another potential revenue stream, and we're going to actually push people to use old IP in new songs, right? That's where you get like that terrible Portugal the Man song. like Rebel Just for Kicks, which is the same thing as Please Mr. Postman, is like, to my mind, like the perfect example of that, which is like some executive was like, what if you use Please Mr. Postman? I mean, I don't actually know the genesis of that song, but like taking old IP and being like, instead of saying you can pay us to use it, being like, use it. People already know it. It's already a hit. It'll give you a leg up. And if you listen to like, certainly like the hip hop charts, there's a lot of songs that are like, basically Missing You 96, but like the 2023 version. So by this point, right, like 5 years after this lawsuit, what you actually do get is the legal system doing kind of its job over time, right? Which is that this was a bad court case in many ways, and it was really problematic because what it did was there was a not particularly well constructed, but at least internally coherent set of standards that people knew to avoid crossing, and this lawsuit basically knocked them down but didn't build up any new ones. And so like 5 years later, what you've started to do is get a set of major lawsuits that have kind of gone the way that Pharrell thought that his would, right? Led Zeppelin does not owe the band Spirit $1 quadrillion for the fact that Stairway to Heaven sounds slightly like one of their songs. Katy Perry's Dark Horse didn't owe some absurd amount of money to this like Christian trap rapper who like has a slightly similar melody.
Ed Sheeran has so far like won all of his cases.
But at some level, I think that like the restructuring that resulted from the lawsuit, right? This move towards writing people in, this move towards interpolation, this sense that it's easier just to pay money to the older rights holders has already happened, and it seems like has been incredibly important for the like the way the music industry has gone over the last 5 years. And I don't see it slowing down because also like you never know, right? No one wants to lose millions of dollars, and it's easier to just write people in, it turns out.
Yeah. So I guess like maybe to like wrap the episode up, like maybe we should kind of like talk about things like I kind of have two questions. Like one, like my first question is, how much do you think this is kind of driven by the sort of diminishing returns and profit for artists because of like streaming, that like, oh, like this sort of make like desperation to like find like other revenue streams? And then also, I guess my other question is like, since the thing that I mentioned at the top of the show, which is, what does this mean for like AI generated music? Because, and this is a whole topic for like another show, but like there are elements of AI that I think are, regardless of maybe some people's skepticism about it, like are going to help producers like in the studio. But I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like what if that AI helps production accidentally gets a little too flies a little too close to a famous Marvin Gaye track?
Yeah. I mean, I do think those are really, really good questions. I mean, I think for the first one, right, is the streaming question, is my gut is that this is the backdrop to all of this is less about diminishing returns, so that like that's clearly important always, but more about the fact that like Big Hit now continues to produce money over a longer period of time, right? That Blurred Lines isn't streaming as much as it was, obviously, but every time a wedding DJ plays it, someone gets paid in a way that just wasn't true for like when everyone had the Jackson 545 and was still playing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they generated more money at the top, but like that tail's lower. And right, albums didn't used to stick around forever in the same way that they do now. I mean, albums went out of print, right? Like,
and this is also one of the reasons why you've seen like the rise in like these catalogs being sold as well.
Right, exactly. And so those I think are really linked. And it's interesting. Like my sense is, and I'm sure there are people who know better, but like, to what extent does this lawsuit which happens in 2018, serve as a starting gun for the movement of private equity and capital into music publishing. It had already started, but I'm just doing like a quick like run through of all these companies in my head, and the big money comes in after, right? And it does seem to me that like if you're radically expanding not just the potential of like what could potentially be a copyright infringement, but also just the likelihood in the wake of this that everyone was going to settle always, right? All of a sudden, the Marvin Gaye estate is worth more, right? Because there's more songs that borrow from it. Or the real talk, the P-Funk estate is worth more because, like, does, a Dr. Dre track really sound like a Parliament track? Yes. Like it does. It's very different in certain ways, but like partially because there's like, and this is the thing that I think that is really complicated about this, and it kind of goes to your second point, right? The reason that P-Funk track and the Dr. Dre track are really different is because it's a little bit slower, and the Dre track has Dre drums, right? Those drums knock in a way that P-Funk drums just don't. But there's not a legal language to describe that at any way. There's no non kind of like grab a guy off the street and see if he thinks it sounds the same, or have musicologists argue set of legal standards to determine whether being influenced by P-Funk's synth playing but adding a new rhythm that allows it to function in a totally different way is enough of a transformation, let alone the fact that there's not like a way without kind of backroom deals where you can say, oh, it's 7% and they go, it's 15%, you're like 9% deal, right? There's no legal way to say like, oh, this track is actually, I mean, I guess the judge gave an amount of damages, but like it's either copyright infringement or it's not. It's not like, not precise, it's 27% P-Funk, which like it at some level, ideally you'd want to maybe like, that would be, I mean, maybe not, but like.
Yeah, David Krakowski in writing about Blurred Lines kind of like he writes some things that are kind of similar to like what you're saying, in the sense that like he's like Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams didn't make a mechanical reproduction, as the term goes, of the song, but they did make creative use of Marvin Gaye's original work. And he like later writes, like, I think it would be more accurate to say that Thicke and Williams copied Gaye's work in a more modern manner, highlighting a part of someone else's work as an aspect of their own creative process, as we all do now all the time in the digital realm. And I think if you look at like Dre, it's like Dre is clearly like influenced by like that era, that funkadelic Parliament stuff. But it's like, he's like, and he's like, is he copying the work? It's like, I mean, he's copying the sound in a modern manner and then applying his own touches to it. Like, does that, and so like, but when which like, as Krakowski writes, is like totally common. But then when it gets into like the legal weeds, that's when things like get into trouble.
It's also complicated that in a studio setting, right, copying can look different.
Right.
Once you have things like reference tracks, like if I'm basically, playing a Can type groove with my band, and we listened to like a bunch of Can albums and then try to play a Can groove, that's one thing. You could also do a thing that I have read or heard in a couple places and like haven't been able to fully track down, but like I have heard that some people have speculated that making this track, Pharrell did something like have the Marvin Gaye track, put new music on top of it, pull the Marvin Gaye track.
Huh, interesting.
Right. Unable to track that down, but like my understanding is that was what some of the experts from the Gaye estate argued, which would like, right? That's again, there's no no element left of that thing, but it's like, it's the fact that again, that the copyright isn't a good way to deal with these things. And that's really, I think, going to be the issue with AI, right? So you said at the top of the show, not to like date this episode immediately, but that we recently had this AI Drake song. And I think it's important to note, like, there's a couple ways you can have AI music. This is AI voice modulation. So it made who is ever rapping sound like Drake and who's ever singing sound like The Weeknd. There's other ways you can use AI to construct entire tracks. That doesn't quite fully work right. It's very much, you can listen to them at least right now. It'll probably be perfect in like another 6 to 9 months. Who knows? But like, it depends whether we're in exponential growth or we're in S curve. We don't know. But right now, if you have a AI produce a whole track, it's very weird. It's like those like AI images where it's like it almost looks like a person, but they're bending kind of wrong and they've got the wrong number of fingers. Yeah,
and then you look at the hands.
You're like, oh, there's something wrong about this. Like the AI music right now sounds almost like music, but it's not. It's very weird and kind of awesome because of that.
Yeah.
But the information in a voice you can copy pretty effectively. And so like that is a whole copyright question, right? Like Drake spent a lot of time building the set of cultural references around his voice, and B, figuring out like how to make his voice the expressive instrument it is. And then someone used machine learning and trained on hundreds of hours of like Drake music. I don't know if there's hundreds. There's probably close. Drake's released a lot of music.
Yeah.
And like all of that's in there, even though Drake didn't sound like that. And so it's not right now. My understanding is our copyright laws don't have any way to say, right, if you were a perfect Drake impersonator. I mean, there have been some lawsuits about that. There was a Tom Waits impersonator on a commercial, and Tom Waits won a lawsuit.
No shit.
But they were saying they were too close to a very specific Tom Waits competition and not doing like a Tom Waits type beat. But right, like, so there's like, these are really big legal questions. And I think that the Blurred Lines lawsuit is really useful because useful for precisely for the lack of clarity that it provides for all of this, right? Like, Blurred Lines really just gestures to the fact that there's this gaping hole in the legal infrastructure around music and around musical similarity, and that the old rules don't work, and that there really aren't new rules except like kind of rule of thummy type situations, but like that's not good enough to deal with something as big and complicated as music. And I think it probably goes both ways, right? Like if you think about the actual landscape of the music industry, on one side, you don't want people to be able to, I don't know. I mean, maybe it is like getting rid of innovation. I don't know if this track, which is just like a not very good Drake track, total side note, you know who comes off like as the most uncopyable person? 40, the producer, right? Because it kind of sounds like Drake and it kind of sounds like The Weeknd, but there's no way that 40 would ever let a track sound that bad come out of his studio, right? But like, why the shittily recorded piano of that song is the wrong kind of shitty piano loop? Like, I don't know. I have no idea how you, right? But it clearly is. Right, at one level, like, I don't know. I think that probably just having like new people release songs that are just bad carbon copies of famous artists is probably not good. The flip side, you don't want to say like, maybe there's some really cool creative stuff that you could do with other people's voices. There probably is. That's on one side. The flip side is it probably goes both ways. There's about to be all kinds of neat AI art. And one thing that, if we've learned one thing from Saxon, you and I's study of the music industry and just also general experience for the last 8 years of like American life, it's that if you have a lot of money in lawyers, you can quash stuff. You can ruin people's lives, even if you lose the lawsuit, right? And my gut is that if it's all blurred lines, you're going to get the people with the money and power, and that's going to be the major labels, able to make the landscape that they want best. That means suing who they want to sue, basically, and tying them up in endless litigation to create whatever reality they want.
And I think that actually you probably already see that with like the streaming services deciding to pull down the like whatever you want to call it, Drake, The Weeknd AI generated song, because and so my thinking, like, those are two major artists, top 1% of probably artists getting played, and I just question, like, would these streaming services do the same if, like, I made an AI generated song that sounded like, I don't know, Waves Blood or something like that, and like,
probably
not.
Or if Drake, who is a known jacker of styles,
let's talk about that, right?
Drake used AI to better copy like some dancehall artist's flow, which seems like totally possible.
Yeah, would the streaming services, would the label step in? Questionable.
I mean,
Yeah,
no,
not,
they wouldn't
right?
step in. And in fact, they'd be very difficult to sue because they have a lot of lawyers on retainer.
So exactly. So basically, what we're saying is like it's almost like a reinforcement of like the sort of hierarchies that are in place. And
Which is kind of like the thing is that when there's not a clear set of legal standards. I mean, it's this funny thing, right? At one level, you want good legal standards, but minus
Completely.
good legal standards, you kind of want legal standards. And having just no legal standards at one level, like, has been really destructive, or at least distracting for like a couple of major artists. But I think that like that seems like it said they got better lawyers and didn't have Robin Thicke being like really saying that he considers himself a bad person in the deposition. They go, "Do you consider honest?" They're like, "Do you consider yourself an honest person?" He's like, "No." Like, shit. Okay, well there goes that lawsuit.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know what I can't wait for? I can't wait for like the A-list celebrity artist beefs about like who's jacking whose AI style.
It's a brave new world, buddy.
Because you know that shit's gonna happen. Brave new world. Well, on that note, we'll tie a bow in this episode. Please rate and review us. Follow us on all the socials. Please subscribe to our newsletter, Music by Bird Language. We'll see you in a few weeks' time. Bye.